Welcome to my Star Wars room. This is my study where I've got a lot of my action figure collection on display. And thought since I've got one of each model of the Falcon that I use to build currently built as guitars, I would take this chance to kind of go through what each version of the Falcon that I use has, its pros and cons, to show potential customers what they have the options of getting. I've had a lot of interest here lately in the Millennium Falcon guitars that I build, and a lot of questions about how I build them, what goes into them, and which versions that I have available. Believe it or not, there's several different options, and there's a lot of differences in between them that if you're not a toy collector or a Star Wars collector, you just wouldn't know. So we'll start with the one here. This is the Solo, a Star Wars story version of the Falcon. Hasbro came out with this toy a few years ago. It is a discontinued item. Of course, all of the Star Wars items that I build guitars with are unfortunately discontinued. And most of the toys that I use are getting more difficult to find in good enough shape for me to use to turn into guitars. So unfortunately, I am having to raise prices just a little bit. So if there is a specific guitar or a specific toy rather that you want to use, be forewarned that they are getting more and more difficult for me to source. So prices will vary depending on how expensive it is for me to get those toys. Now, my prices when I sell one of these guitars do fluctuate based on how much I did have to pay to get those toys, because again, I'm using recycled materials that I'm getting secondhand. So, like I said, this is the Solo, a Star Wars story version of the Millennium Falcon. The toy itself is a lot of fun. It is the version that Han gets from Lando Calrissian when he loses the sabacc game at the end of the movie. It's the one where he brags he makes the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. In the movie, it has this really nice, clean look to it with the blue markings. In the movie, it actually gets its signature hunk of junk look to it in the end. And the toy has this really cool feature where if you push a button long enough and enough times, a motor in the inside vibrates and pops off panels. So when it's in the toy version, there's 2 panels in the front and 2 panels in the back that actually pop off. When I make the guitar version, I glue those panels down so they no longer come off. In fact, where the bridge goes, I have to actually take that motor completely out of the toy. Inside these, with all of the Falcons, I have a solid block of maple that joins the bridge to the neck and serves as the anchor point for the guitar. So this is basically a solid body guitar, electric guitar, with the toys wrapped around that structure to make it a playable instrument. My favorite part, as you just heard, is that the sound effects of the toys still work. And I'm not going to demo that here, but the sound effects are rigged so that they play through the amp while you're hooked into the amp. So if you're hooked into the amp and you hit the buttons, all the sound effects will actually play through the amp. And in the case of this one, there is an isolated volume knob that controls the sound effect volume for that. So you can turn up or down the sound effects to play through the amp as loud as you would like it to. And there is a cutoff switch. I actually moved that button away from that spot and put it down here on any future builds that I do to avoid that exact thing from happening. But I do also put this cutoff switch that cuts out that circuit from inadvertently triggering the sound effects to play through the amp while you're playing the guitar if you don't want that to accidentally happen. And instead of hiding it under this panel like I've done with this one, in future builds I actually put it on the surface so that you have easier access to it. So I'm not going to actually demo the guitar in this video on any of these builds because I use recycled materials for the necks and the pickups. So almost every single version of these that I build is unique, and it would be pointless for me to demo these versions for you if you're not going to be buying this specific instrument. Every version I build is going to be unique, and the pickups are what make the guitar itself sound unique. So it would be pointless to play these guitars and demo that sound for you. The purpose of this video is to show off which version of the Falcon that I'm using for the body. So keep that in mind while you watch this. So I'm going to run through the different sound effects that this toy will do. One of my favorites is that if you flick the switch, which is actually in the toy, triggered by lifting the toy off the ground, there's a pressure switch. It jumps into hyperspace. And then there is another switch that triggers these lights on the front. And if you continue pressing that button, the lights flash faster and faster, then alarm sounds start going. Until eventually it settles into this kind of mode, and it sits there for a little bit until it powers down and has that sound effect. That classic engine dying sound of the Falcon turns on and turns it back off. To re-engage, you have to flip the switch back and then hit it again. And it cycles back through it. Then if you don't hit that button, the lights don't turn on. And it goes into that shutdown sequence. You can also cut it off early. So there's a few different things to play around with this model. You'd also have the laser sounds and a missile launch if you hold it down. So I like this model because it comes with a lot of different variations of sound effects. The light ups features are cool. And of course, when you plug in the jack, I've got it rigged so that the engine itself turns on. I add a strip of LED lights to the engine. Like I said, the lights in the engine are tripped by plugging in the jack to an amp. When you plug it in, the engine lights up, like you see here. Turned out the light so you can see it. And those do run off the 3 AA batteries that are installed in the toy. That runs the sound effects and the lights and does not take power through an amp or anything like that. The jack is just what trips the switch that completes the circuit for this LED light. And in future builds, I will actually add a little 6-volt power pack that can be plugged into a wall outlet that will allow you to plug it in and display the model with the lights turned on that bypasses that battery pack altogether. So that will allow you to display the model with the lights turned on, hanging up on a wall, without fear of the batteries being ran down inadvertently from being turned on for any amount of time. Of course, you want to unplug that from a wall outlet if you're going to be actually playing the guitar, so when you plug in the jack, that doesn't mess up anything electronically. You want to make sure that that plug is unplugged before you plug in the jack. And I do that with all of the Falcons that I build from here on out. One of my other favorite things about this is it has some little compartments that still open up. So this one is one of my favorites. You can put a couple picks or your Allen wrenches in there. Anything that you need, like to adjust the truss rod or the bridge, you can throw those in there. And it is pretty secure. They can be popped off kind of easy if you're not careful. But that's a really cool feature of this one that I still really like. And of course, I put strap buttons on the back as well. So that is the Solo: A Star Wars Story Falcon. Okay, the next two models of the Falcon I have are modeled after the vintage Kenner Millennium Falcon toy. However, these two versions are actually much newer. This one is the 1990s Power of the Force model that was just the remold of the vintage toy. Has newer stickers, newer electronics. It's less brittle than that older vintage toy. I have built with the vintage Kenner toy before, but typically they're very yellowed. They're usually not in very good shape. It's very rare to find them complete, and they're usually much more expensive than getting the Power of the Force version that was built or sold rather in the 90s. And then the one next to it is actually the 2004 original Trilogy Collection version made by Hasbro that had updated electronics and some updated LED lights and a newer engine feature that I'll show you in more detail here in a minute. Now, the thing I don't like about the 90s Power of the Force version is that the radar dish is bolted on. So the 2004 version, it can be popped off, so it can be moved out of the way. Unfortunately, that also means it's usually lost. So this one, I didn't have that because when I bought it, it didn't have it with it. When I get them on eBay, they're usually missing parts. The most common missing part is the radar dish and the canopy. The other most common missing part is the boarding ramp, which this one is also missing. The other thing I do not like about the 90s version, the Power of the Force version of the Falcon, is that this one ran on 2 C batteries, while the 2004 version ran on 3 AA batteries, which means that the 2004 version I can update with the LED lights like I like much easier. I can tap into the battery pack that's already in it, well as the 1994 version or 95 version, I have to add a battery pack in it. Typically the battery pack on these are so badly corroded anyway that it just doesn't work to begin with. And it's rare that I find these that the electronics even work to begin with at all. So let's look at the 90s version of the Falcon a little closer. The cockpit is a little different. It opens up to the side and it actually pops off very easily. That you can see that there's no glass in this one. It's completely hollow. That glass piece typically gets lost, so it rarely comes with this Falcon. It does creak and pop a lot, so while you're playing, that's probably going to be kind of annoying. You can hot glue it on. That's what I've done in the past with these, but I leave that up to the person who buys it. As you can see, it's kind of difficult to pop it back into place. There we go. There. The other thing is the engine detail is just a sticker. So I Dremel out some of the bracing that is there and then stick on the LED lights that I like to add for the engine, which means I am kind of cutting away some of the structure of the plastic toy. Where I put the battery pack for those lights is inside the little hideaway compartment, and this whole back piece of the toy actually comes apart. That was part of the playability of the toy when it was made. So to replace those batteries, you actually have to take off this back panel, and I usually secure it with tiny screws here, 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 and here. So you have to take off all of those screws, lift that back panel off to get the battery pack that I've added. This also gives you a little bit of room to work with the electronics. And if I do hook up the sound effects on these, there will be an extra switch and a knob here that powers or adjusts the sound effects that play through the amp. So this one does have lights rigged up, so we can plug it in. So there you see those LED lights in the engine. You can see they have lights in the cockpit and on the front as well. This particular version I didn't run the sound effects through the amp. And when you compare those sound effects to the next model, you'll see why. Those are kind of more generic sci-fi sounds than actual sounds of the Millennium Falcon. If you're a fan of Star Wars, you'll see that they kind of sound off. They don't really sound like the Falcon. That's why I like the 2004 version a little better. The deco on it is a little better. It's more true to the Falcon itself, if you can find it with the stickers still on it. Occasionally I find it new in box. Of course, this one still lights up as well. But notice the difference on the engine. It has this plastic kind of container for the LED lights that it came with. It had LED lights that lit up the engine, although I add some strip LEDs that give it a much brighter engine. And then I add LED lights to the cockpit as well as the front, just like the other version I demoed just then. And then, of course, the sound effects. These run much longer too. So that one has more sound effects that sound actually like the Falcon. It, of course, has its own volume knob for those and a cutoff switch that cuts it from the actual amp if you're playing it through the amp. Okay, and last but not least, this is the Disney popcorn bucket from the Disney parks. This was the souvenir popcorn bucket when The Force Awakens came out and the Disney parks first opened up. I believe it was discontinued and then reissued for a little while, but again is discontinued, so it's getting harder and harder to find. I've also added lights for it, so they're not as brilliant as the other versions, and there is some bleed through from that. It did come with its own lights, but it was powered by one tiny little LED and a button cell battery, so they weren't very bright. So what I did is I actually took advantage of the way that this opens. This is where it would open and they'd put your popcorn bag into. And I added the battery pack here, and the trip wire for that is in the jack. So that's how you would get to access that power pack, the battery pack if you needed to change the batteries. And again, I can rig these up. This one isn't rigged up that way to be hung on the wall, but I can, if it is requested, add that bypass and switch to be displayable. These are a lot more simple. There's no sound effects, of course. They're small though, and I like that small shape for making a 6-string. They look really, really nice when finished up. Occasionally I will paint and weather them so that they look more like the movie Falcon. They are very bare bones. They're not really, they're not painted very well. The bottom's not painted at all. So occasionally I'll take the time to weather them and paint them and make them look more like the Falcon. If you go to my Instagram, you'll see some versions that I've painted and how much better they look painted up and weathered. Occasionally, like I said, I'll do that. If I do, I'm going to charge a little bit more for that paint job. But yeah, those are the various versions of the Falcon that I do. My favorites are, of course, the ones that have sound effects that are really fun to play through the amp. And adding the lights are always fun. I'd love to see somebody get up on stage with one of these and plug that in, have it light up, and then start jamming out with the sound effects. I think that would be really, really cool. If you're interested in one of these, please reach out. I typically have one or two already in my inventory at any given time because they're really great conversation starters and showpieces to have in my booth and on my website. If you're interested in commissioning one, it really varies when I have parts and what I have available because I do use recycled materials. One way to get me to do a commission, though, is if you have parts from a guitar that you would like to use for the project, that really cuts down the time and cost and energy for me to actually source all the parts for the build. And especially if you can find the toy and the guitar parts, then all I have to do is charge you the labor to put it together, and then whatever it costs to ship it back to you. So that's one really good way of getting me to actually do the commission, is if you find all the parts and send those to me and then have me just put it together. Of course, I have some folks that around town here in Cincinnati that can usually source me some parts pretty easily. Thanks Toy Department up in Fairfield. If you've ever in Cincinnati, go check them out. They're awesome. So yeah, there you have it. If you're interested in seeing more of this kind of stuff, give me a follow here on YouTube. Go check out my Instagram and Facebook. It's at Don't Fret Guitars. You can go to my website, www.don'tfretcbg.com, and find links to all of those there. You can also find a link to my Reverb store where you can purchase what's in my current inventory at any given time if you're not local to Cincinnati. If you are local to Cincinnati, you'll find my vending schedule posted on my website in a Google Calendar, and you can find where I'm going to be vending every weekend or upcoming vending events. And come find me and give these a play for yourself. Hope to see you. Yeah, let's jump to hyperspace. We're all set up at Findlay Market till 6. Come check out the booth. Let's go for it.